exploiting their fear of venturing into their initial dungeons. Their meeting concluded, they embark on their dungeon delve, with Hasten poised to eliminate them should they overstep their boundaries. Within the dungeon's depths, the group confronts levelly monsters, posing a minimal threat. The two D-rank hunters appear to relish the experience, yet their exaggerated efforts against these weak foes reveal a clear pretense of exertion, subtly allowing small clusters of monsters to slip towards Hasten. This occurs intermittently, likely stemming from Hasten's earlier refusal to compensate them, prompting them to retaliate subtly. Under different circumstances, their negligence could easily result in injury. Meanwhile, the two espers find amusement in the D-level hunters' theatrical display. Heisen questions their lack of participation in the combat. As hunters with substantial expenses, they should capitalize on this chance to hunt weaker creatures and accumulate experience. The pair clearly lack self-assurance, but complete inaction severely hinders their development. Heisen reminds them that the current monsters are mere oversized rodents. Even if injured, they have a skilled healer as their ally. With this encouragement, they decide to engage in the battle, annoying the D-level hunters, who had intended to monopolize the dungeon's rewards. The two attempt to intimidate the Esper siblings, warning of a monstrous rodent, the size of a house, imminent arrival. As if on cue, a deafening roar reverberates, signaling the approach of a massive creature. With the boss's impending arrival, the hunters demand an additional 1 million as compensation for continued protection. Arguments arise about this deviation from their agreement, but the hunters finally reveal their true intentions. They attribute their sudden apathy to Hasten's previous refusal to pay. They expect him, a mere healer, to crumble under the strain and finally pay up. Being a top-tier S-rank carries a heavy burden of responsibility, and now that he's achieved S-rank, he can't escape the public eye. The two espers attempt to defend Hasten, as he's done nothing to provoke this. But the D-rank hunters are unfazed by potential repercussions. After all, Hasten lacks the backing of a powerful guild. Knowing this, they believe they can act with impunity. The pair decide to remain idle, refusing to assist in the boss fight, unless Hasten meets their demands for money. Otherwise, they threaten to self-harm and falsely accuse the S-rank healer of attempted murder. Hasten has remained silent throughout, absorbing their hollow threats without a single word. They misinterpret his silence as fear. Park Hyasang even contemplates recording him, floundering against a 1-star dungeon and uploading it online for further ridicule. He figures he could profit from selling such a video online, a proud S-rank hunter wouldn't want their vulnerabilities exposed in such a manner. Finally, Hasten stirs and advances towards the hunters, who have been ceaselessly spouting their nonsense. He reminisces about his childhood, when he believed hunters were impressive and admirable figures. Now, experiencing them firsthand, he recognizes them as utterly worthless individuals. The two hunters have pushed their scheme too far, and Hasten is enraged by their sheer idiocy. Abruptly, the two D-rank hunters are paralyzed by Hasten's potent ether, enveloping them completely. Park Hyasang still attempts to salvage the situation, threatening to report any action Hasten takes to the press. But Hasten remains unimpressed by their feeble attempts at intimidation. He inquires if they know of a hunter who received a personal lesson from Sung Jinwoo. He reveals that he was the recipient of that unforgettable lesson. Though he despises uttering that man's name, he'll exploit any advantage in this predicament to ensure these two learn their lesson. Park Hyasang distinctly recalls hearing something similar recently in a news report. If it's truly factual, then there's absolutely no chance the media will bail him out of this mess. He still attempts to force the issue, contemplating whether to punish Hasten severely for his audacity. But he instantly senses something amiss. Hasten stands behind them, Exa radiating its ethereal white dream state. As the two men find themselves immobilized, the power dynamic dramatically shifts. It's evident that Haisen now completely commands the situation. The two men finally grasp the gravity of their predicament, dropping their amateur villain act. Heisen's penetrating stare suffices to persuade them of their utter helplessness. He even declares his fearlessness of public scrutiny. Their prior confidence evaporates, and Hasten ponders if White Dream has even silenced their tongues. With the tables turned, Hasten proposes a deal. Since they're currently incapacitated and a formidable boss monster approaches, their situation is perilous. If this persists, Hasten can't guarantee their survival, but if they desire his aid, his protection, a small fee is required. He then showcases his prowess by sending the monstrous creature flying with a single kick. Kim Hyosun observes that Hassan's kick lacked force, confirming their suspicions of his weakness. Furthermore, his attacks are enraging the colossal rodent. Park Hyasun, on the contrary, recognizes that Hyson's movements surpass the abilities of a typical healer. Then, it dawns on him. Hassan is intentionally provoking the creature, goading it into charging towards them. Even the two espers burst into bewildered laughter as Hassan steers the monster directly toward the 2D level hunters. The monster advances, and Hassan closes in on Park Hyasun, leaning in to whisper in his ear. Overwhelmed by Hassan's menacing presence and furious expression, Park Hyasun understands. Disobey the S-level healer, and he's a dead man. He's heard the whispers about Hassan, a penniless nobody from Gabingdong, a prodigy S-level hunter, barely 20. The next Maria, a 20-year-old S-rank hunter hailed as the next Maria. But one thing is undeniable. This man holds their lives in his hands, ready to end them if they don't answer swiftly. Terrorized, the two men scream as the monster's jaws loom inches from their faces. Hassan decides they've had enough introspection for one day. Their lesson has been learned. With a single, powerful kick, he dispatches the monster, launching it skyward. Before it lands, he uses poison steps to flash behind. Until now, fighting boss monsters demanded restraint, lest he accidentally kill them. Unleashed, the fight becomes effortless. Now, at full strength, he makes short work of the monster. It's easier than the goblins he fled from in his third dungeon delve. The others are astounded by the healer's speed. Park Hyasun is paralyzed with fear. The realization hits him hard. He's crossed the wrong person. Before he can react, Hassan materializes behind him, placing a hand on his shoulder. The paralysis induced by RMC dissipates, and sensation slowly returns to their bodies. Yet, Park Hyasun remains frozen, grappling with the swiftness of their defeat. His companion, Kim Hyosun, less perceptive, seems ready to retaliate, oblivious to the danger he's courting. Hassan unknowingly provokes Park Hyasun further. Park Hyasun must intervene before a fight he cannot win erupts. They've lost, their deal shattered by Hassan. But it's clear that attacking him would be a losing battle. They'd be the ones getting pummeled. Park Hyojin decides to abandon his thuggish behavior for good. It seems his encounter with Hasten has thoroughly frightened him into reformation. While the two squabble, the Esper siblings approach Hasten to express their gratitude. RMC was astonishingly powerful, and he remained completely humble about it. He's also incredibly compassionate, defending those who are vulnerable. All this leads them to label him a hero. Hasten can't help but crack a small smile at the unexpected compliments. The trio departs the dungeon, laughter echoing behind them. They continue singing Hasten's praises as they exit. Hasten returns the money stolen by the two D-rank thugs. He retrieved the funds from the delinquents and promptly sent it to the siblings. After all, it was rightfully theirs. They insist he keep the money, arguing he earned it fairly by outsmarting the thugs. But he firmly declines. Did you mean to ask, do you change your mind? Instead of do you change size? He smiles, admitting his resolve is unwavering. Despite their continued protests, Hasten is far too stubborn to reconsider. Nevertheless, he can't simply let them leave without one last gesture. He hands Hasten a business card for a company called the Umbrella Industry. The name rings a bell, but Hasten can't place it. He's puzzled by the card until he notices the CEO's name, Do Isa. The CEO shares the same surname as the siblings, implying a familial connection. Du-chan confirms the individual on the card is their father, meaning these two were likely incredibly wealthy. His earlier boasting about money, now knowing their true affluence, filled him with immense embarrassment. Mortified, he stood frozen as the siblings departed, bidding him farewell as they left. Hasten eventually returned home, taking stock of his spoils. From the one-star dungeon, he'd only acquired 12 cores, all weak, befitting a beginner dungeon. He had exclusively absorbed black cores until now, cores extracted from poisonous monsters and toxic dungeons. While any hunter could absorb them, they were his preferred source. This would be his first time absorbing normal cores. According to V1, he possessed no limitations in absorbing them. This meant he wasn't restricted to poisonous dungeons for leveling. The cores were absorbed rapidly, proving far weaker than anticipated. After a quick glance at his status window, he realized he'd barely gained anything from those feeble cores. However, he noticed a new skill, commune. It granted him the ability to converse with monsters and offered limited communication with sapient beings. The skill likely manifested due to his bond with Pori. It also explained his earlier interaction with the colossal tiger. Now, his primary concern was continued growth. He was still weak, his progress decelerating. He contemplated illegally venturing into poison dungeons again. He needed the potent black cores for advancement. They contained significantly more ether than regular cores. Black cores possess several times the ether compared to others. The allure of their ether was so enticing. Extensive experiments were conducted to harness their power, but each attempt failed miserably. Consequently, black cores were deemed hazardous waste, dismissed as a viable energy source. Yet, for poison mages, black cores were paramount for growth. They fueled their accelerated development, allowing them to surpass other hunters. Core absorption was the most effective method for enhancing abilities. High-level cores were costly, hindering most hunters' advancement in growth, leaving them stagnating at their initial awakening level. He was indebted to Dr. Jean for this valuable knowledge. But even with all this knowledge, his advancement remains frustratingly slow. Besides a black core, the only other thing capable of providing a substantial power boost would be a gold core. They used it to gauge his potential during the hunter exam. If he could absorb something that potent, he could undoubtedly achieve immense strength. However, currently, that's an impossible feat. Meanwhile, outside his residence, two recognizable figures knocked on his door. He hadn't anticipated any visitors at this hour. Opening the door, he found the two hunter exam proctors. Beaming back at him, they had read the news report detailing his triumphant first dungeon completion and decided to offer their congratulations in person. Hassan welcomed the men as they introduced themselves and commended him on achieving S-rank hunter status. But our protagonist was more curious about their presence. Why were they here? Kayakyu disclosed. His awareness of Hassan significantly hampered progress. Thus, they had much to discuss. Inside, Hassan prepared tea, along with cookies and refreshments. As they conversed, his sister was absent, and he hadn't expected company. They would have some uninterrupted time to talk. With the initial pleasantries concluded, Hassan addressed the matter at hand. He inquired about the purpose of their visit. Kyohyoku asked if Hassan knew about the recent news concerning the sudden emergence of dungeons. Apparently, there had been a significant increase in unmanageable dungeons overwhelming the Hunter Association and guilds in Sujin-dong, Cheongsan-dong, and Imidong as well. 3 new dungeons materialized just yesterday. This triggered a Code Yellow emergency alert. Code Yellow signifies the 3rd highest threat level. The Double Gates incident, which launched Hassan's hunter career, was fortunately a Code Yellow. This time, there were no fatalities. The alert was primarily issued due to the bizarre nature of the event, rather than any immediate peril. The peculiarity of this situation stems from a monster emerging from a dungeon. There are 2 distinct portal types: dungeons and gates. Dungeons are unidirectional, portals leading to alternate dimensions teeming with monsters, while gates function as two-way doorways that hunters can enter and through which monsters can emerge. Typically, gates manifest only when dungeons become overrun with monstrous hordes. In such instances, a phenomenon known as a gate breach occurs, where creatures surge out of the gate and into the human world. However, in this specific instance, the monster emerged while the portals remained classified as dungeons, not gates. This anomaly explains the Code Yellow declaration. It's a highly unusual event. Fortunately, the damage was minimal and there were no casualties, primarily because the dungeon possessed a low threat level. Had it been a 3-star dungeon, the devastation would have been catastrophic due to the gravity of the situation. The association is maintaining silence regarding the incident. However, concealing information won't resolve the underlying issue. Hassan understands this, and Pyo Haiku expresses his apologies in that regard, acknowledging the futility of secrecy. More importantly, however, the current Hunter Association is ill-equipped to manage this crisis due to a severe personnel shortage. The emergence of dungeons has outpaced the available manpower to close them, coupled with the alarming possibility of monsters breaching from any dungeon. Panic is rapidly spreading throughout the hunter community. Amidst this turmoil, Pyo Haiku uncovered intriguing information. The Imperial Tiger was healed during the previous hunter exam. The Imperial Tiger is a creature notorious for its incurable condition. Not only were the tiger's external wounds fully recovered, but the venom within its body had also been completely purged, a feat truly astonishing in its own right. The entire association was in an uproar, frantically searching for the individual who had healed the abandoned behemoth. The moment he learned of the incident, Pyo Hyoku suspected Hyson was the person they sought. Pyo Hyoku delved deeper into Hyson's capabilities and potential, but only uncovered a plethora of accolades, further intensifying his interest in our protagonist. He resolved to meet Hyson personally for a formal introduction. To his knowledge, Hyson held no guild affiliations and seemed uninvolved in any other noteworthy endeavors. Pyo Hyoku then inquired about Hyson's opinion on poison dungeons. Based on his gathered intelligence, he believed no one was better equipped to conquer these dungeons than Hyson. Hyson attempted to downplay his abilities, suggesting that any S-rank healer could clear a low-level poison dungeon effortlessly. However, the reality was far more complex. Poison dungeons presented less of a challenge for him than standard dungeons. The question remained, how had Pyo Hyoku acquired this knowledge? And why did he require Hyson's assistance? Accepting this request without careful consideration risked entanglement with the Hunter Association. Yet, Hyson couldn't bear to witness suffering. For the time being, he needed to establish an equal footing with Pyo Hyoku and ascertain the benefits of this collaboration. Pyo Hyoku had already prepared compensation for Hyson's cooperation. He presented the golden core from their previous encounter. It was now tainted by dark ether, which had somehow infiltrated the core. After being used to assess Hyson's ether capacity, initially, Pyo Hyoku suspected Hyson of causing the corruption, but quickly dismissed the notion as impossible. Hyson chuckled along with the man, but he suspected he was the likely culprit. The dark ether within the core was probably tainted by his presence during the measurement process. However, if he were exposed as the one responsible for damaging such a valuable core, he'd undoubtedly become enslaved to the Hunter Association. They initially intended to dispose of it, but discarding such a costly core seemed wasteful, even in its compromised state. Yet, Pyo Hyoku intuited that Hyson might find a use for it. It was evident that beneath the man's calm demeanor, he was probing Hyson, gauging his reactions. A gold core stripped of its power was typically worthless, but Hyson could potentially absorb the black ether along with the core simultaneously. Therefore, Pyo Hyoku's offer was a direct inquiry into Hyson's ability to utilize the damaged core. For most, absorbing it would be detrimental. The man's motives remained ambiguous. Currently, his primary objective seemed to be satisfying his own curiosity, but this was inconsequential to Hyson. The gold core, coupled with legal access to poison dungeons, was an irresistible proposition. The gold core evoked the tale of a woman with a pail of water. She placed a single leaf atop the water surface, offering it to a weary traveler, hoping to prevent a stomach ache. But the gold core wasn't a mere pail of water. It was a tempestuous ocean storm. He could only contemplate the immense power he would wield. After absorbing the golden core, abruptly, a vicious right hook hurtled towards his jaw. The impact sent him reeling, instantly erasing the smile from his face. Ajiho, the man who delivered the blow, stoops down to help him up. Thanks to his agreement with Yacha, he secured these training sessions with Ajiho, aiming to master the technique called snapback. Contrary to expectations, especially considering the typical clientele of the black market, Ajiho has been remarkably benevolent lately. The realization that no one surpasses him in wickedness has dawned on him. To expedite their training, Ajiho employs relentless blows, repeatedly sending Hyson sprawling to the ground. It's no overstatement to claim that his trainer surpasses any monster he's encountered in strength. The moment Hyson regains his footing, Ajiho recommences the brutal exercise. He moves with such velocity that he seems to vanish and reappear. And in a flash, Hyson is propelled through the air again, courtesy of a swift kick to the face. By now, this has devolved from a training session into a merciless pummeling. From their sparring sessions, Ajiho discerns that Hyson lacks fundamental combat skills. At this pace, mastering snapback will prove challenging. To learn snapback, Hyson remains resolute, determined to learn it regardless of the consequences. His pact with Yacha carries significant risk, making it unacceptable to surrender now. Hyson activates poison steps, momentarily impressing Ajiho, who accurately deduces that this was a technique used to vanquish the hyena. While swift, it reinforces Ajaho's belief that Hassan needs to refine his fundamental movements. Before Hassan can land a blow, Ajaho employs snapback, redirecting Hassan's dagger mid-strike. This brief display, however, suffices for Ajaho to recognize Hassan's potential. For now, Hassan must focus on mastering basic movements and techniques, essential for wielding a knight's abilities. They commence with rigid body, a training regimen designed to fortify a knight's physique. Hassan inquires about his teacher's training duration. Ajaho reveals that mastering the basic movements alone required a decade of dedicated practice. This revelation concerns Hassan, fearing he'll be unable to assist Kirill in time. If that's the case, he will be very late to assist Kirill. As Hassan persists with rigid body, Baisu enters as Hassan contemplates a respite. He's struggling to gauge his progress, but remains focused on maximizing his advance. Observing his troubled countenance, Baisu offers a cryptic clue. There's something distinctive about Ajaho's techniques. Whenever Ajaho utilizes his skills, Bisu detecte a peculiar aura, more of a sensation than a scent, reminiscent of the poison poppy's effects. If akin to the poison poppy, then Ajaho's abilities might be hallucinatory. The enigmatic movements could stem from an unseen source, something imperceptible. Perhaps Ajaho isn't a knight, but an esper. Espers are hunters who wield an invisible force, achieving extraordinary feats. Thanks to this crucial information, the final pieces of the puzzle click into place. Hassan deduces that these powers likely stem from a multi-ability user. He concludes that Ajaho must be employing two distinct abilities simultaneously. The secondary ability is probably telekinesis. This realization provides the missing clue to understanding snapback. The current obstacle lies in acquiring that ability. All espers utilize telekinesis to some degree in conjunction with their powers. It's a fundamental ability, yet possesses limitless applications. Knights are formidable, but against multiple foes, espers reign supreme. There's no better place to witness this than in a dungeon. He's currently alongside an esper in a dungeon. He's grouped with other hunters in a beginner-level dungeon, and one of them possesses lightning manipulation abilities, an esper. This esper commands the power of lightning. His name is Li Yai-chan. He obliterates a horde of monsters with a single strike. He's only a C-rank hunter, but his dazzling attacks captivate his party. This young man's incessant chatter could make any hunter's ears bleed. Yet, he's hailed as a rising esper prodigy who fantasizes about rivaling Hassan. While the dungeon run is effortless thanks to Li Yai-chan, his incessant babbling is driving Hassan mad. As Li Yai-chan charges off to engage more monsters, Hassan converses with another hunter. Apparently, their guild relentlessly pursued Li Yai-chan. His abilities are as remarkable as his appearance suggests. The guild is known as the Ornauten Guild. The woman he's speaking with is a senior member. It seems she briefly held Li Yai-chan in high regard. Everyone in the party admires Li Yai-chan. He seems to have garnered a small fan club. They cheer him on as he vanquishes the monsters. This encourages him to further amplify his powers for their amusement. Their camaraderie is simple, and they all seem content. He aims to further dazzle them. It's a straightforward dynamic, and everyone appears content. The woman inquires about his plans after the dungeon raid. They're all heading to a celebratory dinner. She encourages him to join them. However, he must decline. He has training scheduled with Ajiho. She's impressed by his dedication to training even after a dungeon run. It's not combat practice, however. It's movement training. It involves agility drills. Ajiho has been rigorously drilling him on these movements for days. As they converse, Li Yai-chan notices something and summons one of his guild mates for a second opinion. The man rushes over eagerly, curious to see the discovery. But his cheerful grin instantly melts into an expression of sheer horror. A light emanates from the ground. And while it initially resembles an axe, it's anything but a treasure. The atmosphere shifts abruptly, and everyone scrambles for safety. The ground's opening is actually a gateway to a hidden dungeon, and their reaction is too slow. The dungeon bursts open, sending them plummeting into its depths, defenseless against the sudden fall. Their immediate priority becomes shielding Hyson. It's a stroke of terrible luck to stumble upon this place at such a perilous time. The dungeon begins to crumble, and people tumble into the chasm one after another, completely vulnerable. At this rate, They're all doomed to perish, with no chance of rescue. The guild members, just moments ago engaged in cheerful banter, are now plunging to their deaths. Li Chan is speechless, paralyzed by shock as his entire guild vanishes into the abyss. Tears well up in his eyes, consumed by the guilt that he might be responsible. But Hasten's sharp voice jolts him back to reality. He rushes past Li Chan, urging the Esper to pursue their fallen comrades. He stresses that there's no time for hesitation if he wants to save them. Their friends are falling to their doom right below. If they survive the initial impact, there's still a chance to rescue everyone. Li Chan observes as Heisen bravely leaps into the darkness without a second thought. Fear grips him, but the sight of someone they just met today, risking everything to save his friends, ignites a spark of courage within him. He can't just stand idly by while this unfolds. In this moment, the potential loss of his guild members is 100 times more terrifying than whatever lurks below. They quickly strategize a rescue plan, knowing it will be a daunting task. Firstly, Li Chan can conjure a protective shield to mitigate fall damage, but he can only protect 4 people at a time. Furthermore, some have already fallen beyond his reach. Fortunately, saving 4 is enough for now, as Hasten can handle the remaining members. Harnessing the power of Exa, RMC materializes stepping platforms, allowing him to trigger poison traps midair. He then rushes forward, determined to single-handedly rescue everyone. He'd only heard tales of the second dungeon. He'd never witnessed one firsthand. Consequently, his reaction was delayed when the dungeon first ruptured, sending everyone plummeting downwards. Most likely, the impact of the dungeon's collapse rendered them unconscious, leaving them vulnerable during the fall. He instructs Exa to widen the platforms, creating more room for him to maneuver between them. Since Li Chan could catch 4 people, his objective was to secure the remaining 2. That way, they could save everyone. He darts through the air, successfully grabbing the 2 who had fallen the farthest. His timing was impeccable. They were about to reach the bottom. The dungeon's atmosphere had dramatically shifted. Post-collapse, its appearance was drastically altered. They finally entered the second dungeon. Li Chan immediately rushed to check on Hasan. Miraculously, he was completely unharmed despite the perilous fall. Thanks to Hasan's quick thinking, they had successfully rescued everyone. The 2 they caught were still unconscious, but thankfully safe and sound. Their tearful reunion would have to wait, however. The dungeon's monsters had already emerged to greet them. They were harpies, each possessing a physical and another level of beast. Their difficulty rating was 4 stars. Li Chan deemed the encounter dangerous, but Hasan knew he could easily eliminate them. A single touch from Exa would instantly obliterate them all. It would be child's play for him to wipe them out. Li Chan misinterpreted Hasan's calm assessment as a desire to avoid direct confrontation. He decided to take the lead while Hasan remained behind. Fortunately, before he could rush into a losing battle, his guild mates awakened to support him. They expressed their gratitude to Hasan for saving them, assuring him they would handle the fight. They urged him to focus solely on healing. Hasan decided to observe the battle, though he harbored concerns about their chances of victory. Despite facing insurmountable odds, the group formed a defensive line, ready to confront the Harpies. The first to strike was a level B Esper, who launched peculiar cards into the air, before detonating them in a massive explosion. For a fleeting moment, the sky blazes with fire. Onlookers begin to speculate that the second dungeon might be less challenging than initially anticipated. However, despite the Esper expending a significant portion of his power, the Harpies remain entirely unaffected by the assault. Note, corrected spelling error, herpes to harpies. Then, they surge forward, signaling the commencement of the true battle. The group initially holds their ground effectively, likely due to their extensive dungeon experience, but it soon becomes evident that the encounter far surpasses their capabilities. The sheer number of monsters is overwhelming, and the Harpies begin to pick them off one by one. Their survival hinges solely on his healing abilities. The woman he conversed with earlier is currently the recipient of his healing. She urges him to flee while he still has the opportunity. The battle is clearly being lost, and it would be a tragedy for the world to lose a formidable S-level hunter due to a double dungeon. Hasten, on the contrary, resolves to do more than simply escape alone. He has been observing them distantly throughout the ordeal, but a healer's duty is to ensure the safety of others. The woman attempts to dissuade him, believing he is merely rushing towards his demise. From her vantage point, the battle is already forfeit. Hasten charging into the fray is practically suicidal. But Hasten knows that surrendering without a fight is utterly ridiculous. Moreover, he is confident in his ability to triumph. He has long since assessed this as an easy victory. The woman remains skeptical of his capacity to alter the situation. What they desperately need is a damage dealer, not another healer. She doubts he possesses the strength to eliminate so many monsters. Hasten concurs that healers often rely heavily on their teammates. He acknowledges that healers tend to be overly dependent on their companions, and their primary function is support. But at this moment, he's no ordinary healer. He then hurls Exa towards the harpies, the weapon whizzing past the exhausted hunters. It strikes one harpy squarely in the abdomen, the force obliterating her instantly. His initial assault only eliminated a handful of them, forcing him to take matters into his own hands. He must single-handedly vanquish the remaining creatures. Utilizing poison steps, he rapidly closes the gap, launching himself airborne to eliminate even more harpies in his path. The other guild members can only observe in astonishment as he decimates the monsters in mere seconds. Despite effortlessly overpowering the harpies, they are simply too numerous. At this pace, he'll never make it home. Unable to utilize Poison Rain in this situation, he urges Exa to hasten. He commands it to transform into something that will allow him to swiftly conclude this battle. The weapon rapidly morphs into a shotgun, further bewildering the other guild members. They watch, dumbfounded, as he annihilates the remaining harpies in seconds with the firearm. For a brief moment, the harpies appear impervious to the bullets. It seems as though the rest of the guild will be forced to intervene. But Hasten implores them to remain calm. If those were conventional bullets, they would be ineffective. However, these are projectiles fired by Exa. They simply require a moment to take effect. The instant the poison takes hold, the harpies begin frothing at the mouth and plummeting from the sky. Hasten is also struggling. It appears the repercussions of wielding something as potent as the shotgun are severely draining his ether. This ability takes a heavy toll, leaving him to recover. A harpy dives towards him, but Li-Chan intercepts it with a swift electrical blast, still proclaiming himself as Hasten's rival. Despite Hasten's overwhelming strength, the battle is far from over. Just as Hasten's ether reserves dwindle, the formidable boss monster emerges. A colossal harpy, boasting 4 wings instead of the usual 2, possessing a physical level of C and an intimidating presence. Fortunately, Hasten has just enough ether remaining for one final strike, and that should suffice to conclude this fight. He slices his hand with Exa, letting his blood spill onto the ground. Then, he launches himself into the air, charging towards the Harpy Queen. He positions himself directly in front of her, unleashing a devastating blow, drenching her in his blood, allowing him to unleash the black ether from within. He then poisoned her with a toxin potent enough to fell even an A-rank knight. Thanks to Heisen's ingenuity and rapid reflexes, he vanquished the boss and conquered the dungeon. The official reports would claim that everyone survived, but would also downplay his role to mere support, asserting he avoided direct combat. The guild members refused to accept this narrative and berated Haste for even suggesting such an inequitable arrangement. He had sacrificed so much for them. It was utterly unjust. He continued, renouncing any claim to a reward, a selfless act the guild simply couldn't comprehend. He clarified that his powers were far too peculiar, and he couldn't risk their exposure to the outside world. Safeguarding his secret was ample compensation. His sole request was for them to refrain from inquiring about his identity. Moved by his apparent nobility, they attempted to protest further, but Haste vanished, utilizing his poison steps to escape their inquiries. He fled before they could delve deeper, and before they could uncover the deception behind his words. Outwardly, it seemed Haste had gained nothing from this ordeal, but unbeknownst to them, he had already claimed the dungeon's greatest prize. He had surreptitiously absorbed the Harpy's core after slaying it unnoticed. This act bestowed upon him a tremendous surge in power. Naturally, he couldn't divulge this truth. His true motives were steeped in avarice. Thus, he fabricated a tale and bolted at the first opportunity. Furthermore, the Harpy core granted him a new ability, Lion's Roar, capable of enslaving his adversaries' minds by channeling ether into his voice. In reality, he reaped the greatest rewards from the expedition, fabricating lies to maintain his facade. Several days after the second dungeon incident, Haste journeyed to a place known as the Cleanup Clan. Inside, a man sat amidst a chaotic scattering of empty beer cans. Each tasted vile, but they were all his meager budget allowed. The man's name was Yuk Chayawan, leader of the Cleanup Clan. His clan had recently received clearance to explore poison dungeons, hoping to uncover a potent artifact he had long sought. Unfortunately, poison dungeons were too perilous for a lone hunter. He had no companions to accompany him. He attempted to contact an old friend, seeking assistance. The two briefly reminisced about their lives, but when the topic of Chawan's Cleanup Clan arose, the friend immediately declined. The venture was financially unsustainable, offering negligible rewards for the immense risks of poison dungeons. His friend then reminded him that the object of his lifelong quest, the golden sunflower, was a myth. He urged Chiwan to abandon his squalid profession and cease pursuing a phantom. The call ended abruptly. His friend's words stung, but Chiwan couldn't relinquish his hope. He still had compelling reasons to search for the sunflower, even if it meant enduring this degrading work. Lost in thought, a knock echoed from the door. He answered, forcing a smile onto his face. But his smile evaporated. At the sight of the figure standing on his doorstep, it was Hassan, a celebrity renowned throughout South Korea, the new S-rank hunter, recognized and endorsed by the Imperial Tiger himself, known to the public as the enigmatic hunter, destined to surpass even Maria. The accolades were overwhelming for Haste, and he urges the man to compose himself. As he enters the room, the man questions Hasten's presence there, but the reason should be self-evident. He's there to enlist in the cleanup crew. He declines joining a guild due to their pointless constraints that hinder him. Clans, however, offer significantly greater autonomy. For the time being, he seeks collaboration with someone who might share his aspirations. Yul Chayawan suspects he's caught in a surreal dream, perhaps having dozed off mid-beer, still unconscious on the guild's couch. But this is no dream, it's stark reality. This reality becomes undeniable as they embark on their initial poison dungeon expedition together. He's completely decked out in hazmat gear because of the dungeon's poisonous atmosphere. To his astonishment, Hasten lacks any protective armor. He cautions Hasten against recklessly entering a dungeon unprotected. But Hasten dismisses his concerns, claiming full responsibility for any harm. He assures Kyawan there's no need for excessive worry. Hasten's resolve is unwavering. There's no dissuading him. With contrasting levels of eagerness, they enter the dungeon. The dungeon air is surprisingly invigorating to our protagonist. Chayawan is utterly bewildered by the unfolding events. Yet he can't complain with such an enthusiastic novice, zealously ready to work. He provides Hasten with a pickaxe for material gathering, but mining can wait. First he must dispatch the encroaching monsters. This time, it's a stampede of menacing horses, charging directly at them. Typically, these horses are passive and less provoked. Their territory must have been breached. At least 10 are already upon them. While Chayawan is apprehensive, Hasten embraces the onslaught as complimentary experience points. The horse's aggression, despite not being in their territory, stems from a monster attracting liquid from the black market. This special concoction, he doused himself with it before entering the dungeon, and now, thanks to that foresight, he can avoid hunting them personally. He eliminates the horses one by one as they charge toward him. But unfortunately, a lapse in his attention allows a few to slip past. They run towards Tail One, who is behind him. However, the clan leader is no coward. He effortlessly dispatches both of them without a hitch. Cheol-One inquires, astonished, if Hasten is truly a healer. His combat prowess far surpasses that of a typical healer. After all, Hasten believes the clan leader is far more formidable, especially considering he's not merely a low-level adventurer. He's actually a B-rank knight. It's peculiar that someone with such exceptional skills would devote themselves to collecting dungeon byproducts. He must have a compelling backstory. With the distractions eliminated, gathering byproducts will be considerably simpler for both of them. But before they can commence their work, Hasten perceives that the boss is scrutinizing them. It's quite distant, requiring intense focus to discern. But Hasten can sense its bristly gaze. He instructs Cheol-One to continue gathering independently, so he can investigate. Then he sprints off with astonishing velocity, a speed even a B-rank knight like Cheol-Wan couldn't replicate. Hasten continues running towards the source of the boss's presence. As he runs, he recollects his last encounter with Ajiho. After a mere month of training, he's progressed enough to barely graze the man's collar. For most individuals, achieving such a feat would require over a decade of relentless practice and training. Now that he contemplates it, it's almost humiliating that he once deemed Hasten talentless. Now that his skills have significantly improved, Ajiho also had to amp up his training regime, pushing himself to a significantly higher level of difficulty. Back then, his mentor told him he'd already eclipsed the Night Thug they encountered at the black market. But now, he needed to validate his progress and discover what challenges the dungeon truly held. He finally located the boss monster, a humanoid wolf creature, the perfect sparring partner. The monster boasted a physical level of C and another of D, presenting a 3-star difficulty. The two faced off, but Hasan was swiftly overwhelmed. Down in a single blow, he rose and resumed the fight, only to be effortlessly defeated again. By the third round, Cheol-Wan had arrived, observing the battle from the sidelines. Having finished gathering resources, he decided against interrupting, remaining a silent spectator. Mid-conversation, Hasan was knocked out with a third punch, demonstrating his clear disadvantage in hand-to-hand combat. The disparity in their physical levels was insurmountable. Through conventional methods, victory was impossible without mastering snapback. Hasan's aptitude and potential were exceptional. Achieving his skill level would take others a decade, yet he managed it in mere months. His talents were extraordinary, even among hunters. However, talent alone wasn't enough for snapback. Created by Yacha, it was intentionally designed to be incredibly difficult to learn. Talent was merely a prerequisite. He was missing a crucial element, and he struggled to identify it. Snapback was more an illusionary technique than a martial art, requiring the merging of the physical body with a phantom. Psychic energy was essential. His telekinetic sensitivity had heightened. After absorbing the Harpy's core, when V1 relayed the message, its meaning was lost on him. Now, it might hold the key to snapback. Talent alone was insufficient. Understanding its fundamental principles was paramount. Witnessing this spectral martial art filled opponents with despair. He'd recently reacted to Ajiho's attack, indicating a nascent understanding, but a rudimentary grasp was far from mastery. While seemingly impossible for ordinary individuals, Hasan was Kirill's disciple. That distinction set him apart. By focusing his energy, he could achieve something extraordinary. The monster lunged, delivering a powerful blow, aiming for a decisive strike. But to the monster's and Cheol-Wan's astonishment, Hasan emerges unscathed from the assault, standing behind the creature. The beast whirls around and lunges again, launching another attack. A sinister grin spreads across Hasan's face. He recalls Ajiho's teachings. First, establish a firm stance. Ensure unrestricted movement and flexibility. Next, strive for impeccable posture and precision. Concentrate on speed and equilibrium. Once these fundamental skills are mastered, the adversary's own force will be their undoing. Having internalized these principles, Hasan flawlessly executes snapback on the monstrous wolf. The devastating counterattack strikes the creature squarely in the chest. Cheol-Wan gapes in astonishment, utterly bewildered. Hasan's technique defies logic and comprehension. Thanks to this triumph, the Cleanup Clan's inaugural dungeon raid is a resounding success. The team emerges without a single injury. Moreover, Hasan gains valuable insight into snapback, growing stronger. The duo continues their collaboration, tackling subsequent dungeon expeditions. Although dungeon permits are typically scarce, Hasan's presence brings a sudden influx of opportunities. Permits begin arriving in overwhelming abundance. Undoubtedly, the association's head referee, Pyo Hyoku, plays a crucial role. Pyo Hyoku and the two adventurers maintain their alliance. And while Hasan remains uncertain of Pyo Hyoku's true intentions, friend or foe, the man has proven nothing but beneficial thus far. One thing remains certain. Pyo Hyoku is no ordinary association employee. Some time ago, Hoi had also unveiled its presence to Cheol-Wan, issuing a cry to alert them about an impending monstrous threat. Cheol-Wan nearly eliminated Hoi for its sudden materialization, but fortunately, they've now forged a close bond. Currently, they're navigating their latest dungeon and are on the verge of conquering it. The formidable boss has already been vanquished. Hasten seizes this opportune moment to inquire about certain matters with Chaowan. Specifically, he seeks to understand why someone is skilled. As Chaowan pursues this particular vocation, Hasten discerns a distinct fascination with poisoned dungeons in the man. It's as if he's relentlessly searching for something elusive. Following Hasten's probing questions, Chaowan recognizes the impossibility of concealing his secret any longer. He inquires if Hasten has knowledge of a legendary blossom, a tale seemingly ripped from the pages of a fantasy. It's rumored to possess the power to eradicate any ailment. Hasten deduces that he's alluding to the golden sunflower. For a flora as miraculous and scarce as this, the appellation is fitting. A flower capable of vanquishing all diseases. Ordinary hunters would never encounter such a marvel. Some would even dismiss its existence as mere folklore. However, Chaowan is unwavering in his belief, driven by a profound purpose. Two types of individuals seek the sunflower: those privy to its existence, and those compelled to believe by dire circumstances. Chaowan tragically failed to safeguard his wife, who currently lies in a hospital bed. He clings to the hope that the sunflower holds the key to her salvation. He has tirelessly explored countless dungeons, undertaking arduous tasks, enduring relentless toil. Over time, his former clan dispersed, and doubt began to creep into his heart. Hasten interjects, pointedly asking if he's referring to the golden sunflower. If so, the reason for his unsuccessful search is glaringly apparent. Golden sunflowers perish alongside the dungeon's boss. Therefore, they must locate it before slaying the beast. There exist 3 varieties of sunflowers: bronze, silver, and gold. The rarer the flower, the more elusive it is to discover. Hasten, too, has never laid eyes on the golden sunflower, but he's certain of its existence. These blossoms solely materialize in poison-laced dungeons, ranked 7 stars or higher. Upon absorbing this information, Keelwyn instructs Hasten to cease speaking if he's merely offering empty solace. However, Hasten affirms the veracity of his words. To substantiate his claim, he unveils the bronze sunflower acquired from this very dungeon. This serves as irrefutable proof of the golden sunflower's reality. Overwhelmed with emotion, Keelwyn crumbles, recognizing that his past endeavors and tireless dedication haven't been futile. Unable to contain himself, he collapses to his knees, crying out in joy. Hasten observes with amusement, his spirits lifted by the man's reaction. He watches as the man revels in a newfound hope. His initial perception of Keelwyn was that of a mere drunken hunter, but now his genuine and dependable nature is undeniable. Extending a hand, he assists Keelwyn to his feet, vowing that together they will embark on a quest to find him. Meanwhile, within the Glory Guild headquarters, Gu-Gun-I is in conference with his secretary, deliberating on organizational matters. Reports indicate a generally favorable progression of events, yet one nagging concern lingers: Chun Hasten's continued absence from the Glory Guild's ranks. Considerable time has elapsed since his unveiling as a formidable S-rank healer, yet recruitment efforts remain unsuccessful. To their relief, he remains unaffiliated with any other guild, but his resistance to joining theirs is unwavering. He is adamant about not joining their guild. Gu-Gun-I, with a knowing smile, decrees a shift in tactics. He commands the secretary to discontinue dispatching personnel to Hasten's residence, instead deploying journalists to remain vigilant. Hasten will undoubtedly be compelled to act once the media's attention is focused upon him. The secretary affirms his compliance, turning to depart, but Gu-Gun-I interjects, inquiring about Maria. The secretary provides reassurance, explaining that Maria has been unusually engrossed lately. This deviation from her norm sparks a flicker of concern within Gu-Gun-I. He dismisses it, presuming all will be well. After all, she has never failed to meet his expectations. His thoughts revert to Hasten. Numerous hunters have rebuffed the Glory Guild's advances over time, for a multitude of reasons. Some were haughty, others obstinate, but ultimately, they all returned to him. Last year, 3 exceptional B-rankers triumphed in the Hunter's exam. Glory Guild was poised to recruit 1, while Bishop Guild intended to acquire the remaining 2. However, the Bishop Guild Hunters had a change of heart and opted to join Glory Guild instead. It was kept from the public, but speculation ran rampant that Glory Guild had pulled strings behind the scenes. Around that period, the relationship between Glory Guild and Bishop Guild plummeted. Glory Guild possessed the wealth and influence to subjugate anyone. Being deemed insignificant in this materialistic society was ample justification for abandonment, and any defiance against them merely demonstrated the need to conform. Yet, for inexplicable reasons, Chio and Hasten persisted in resisting Glory Guild, despite their enticing offers. Did he crave a sincere apology from the chairman himself? He should realize antagonizing Gu-gun would be detrimental. He must have reached an impasse in his development, and his ambition for greater strength should supersede his pride. Gu-gun, I was certain that eventually, Hasten's yearning for S-rank would lead him to Glory Guild. It was merely a question of time. The following day, Hasten strolled down the street and detected someone blatantly tailing him. Only one individual for now, and their attempts at concealment were amateurish. He waited until they were directly behind him, almost touching him, then materialized behind them instantaneously. He deduced that this individual must be affiliated with Glory Guild, and he had already warned them to cease their pursuit. The woman was astonished by his apparent illusory capabilities, as this was omitted from her briefing. But he was more preoccupied with her identity and purpose. She removed her spectacles and apologized if she had given the impression of following him. Then, she disclosed her identity, Maria from Glory Guild. This revelation startled Hasten, as he hadn't anticipated Maria's personal appearance. In an attempt to enlist him, she expresses regret for not informing him of her desired meeting. But the situation is incredibly pressing. She desires to learn more about him. Hasten briefly seizes her shoulders, then fixes her with a piercing stare. He demands to know her true objective with such deceitful tactics. He's certain she wants more than just information. There must be an ulterior motive for her intense interest. The two proceed to Guangdong Park, where Maria reveals that a massive tiger has shattered its restraints and escaped. This, she explains, is the reason for seeking him out, knowing he was the tiger's healer. But this explanation feels insufficient. She surely didn't come just to discuss the impressive escape. Perhaps a scapegoat is needed for the tiger's disappearance. Maybe they require someone to shoulder the blame. Maria insists that's not her intention. She witnessed his healing prowess, observing him regenerate even the tiger's core. That moment convinced her of his superior healing abilities. He surpassed even her own expertise. A dialogue between them, as fellow healers, would be mutually advantageous. Despite her seemingly logical reasoning, he remains skeptical of her true motives. Her fame precedes her throughout South Korea, and, while her intentions seem different from Gu Ganai's, she's still affiliated with the Glory Guild. Perhaps his resentment towards the guild is prejudiced, and he's missing the complete picture. Regardless, she shouldn't have pursued him. He gestures towards a lone child in the playground. The boy used to frequent the park with his mother. She would observe him play from a bench, capturing countless photos with her camera. She always carried it with her. Now, the child plays alone, his mother and her camera nowhere to be seen. Earlier, the discussion of compensation arose. What form of restitution can truly compensate a child for the loss of his mother, especially due to the Glory Guild's negligence? She shouldn't have intruded upon Guangdong, driven by mere curiosity. Elsewhere, Chao Wan slams his fist on the table, enraged by an online article. It portrays Hassan as a formidable hunter who vanished, refusing to aid those in need. Chao Wan fumes, considering the perils Hassan has faced. He can't stand idly by while Cheol is slandered. It might not be significant. His only recourse is to comment on these articles, lavishing praise on Hassan while disparaging Glory Guild. Instead, he sends Hassan a text message, reassuring him that there's no need for concern. But Hassan is completely bewildered by the man's words. Having reached her limit with Hasten's pronouncements, Maria rises abruptly and decides to depart. He was correct all along. Her motivations for coming were entirely self-serving. She offers an apology and begins to walk away, shielding her face with her cap in humiliation. Every word he uttered was undeniably true. She could offer no justification for her actions. After all, she stood by idly while countless lives were lost. She merely watched the desperate cries of those who hailed her as their savior echo in her mind. They pleaded for rescue, desperately hoping for a miracle. But she couldn't save everyone. People condemned her for deaths beyond her control. To this day, she carries the weight of that guilt. She cannot absolve herself for the bloodshed resulting from her shortcomings. Others have attempted to solace her, reminding her that saving everyone is an impossible feat, but she possesses the power to heal. Yet she, a healer, cannot even fathom pain. As she departs, tormented by guilt, Hasten rushes forward and seizes her hand, jolting her from her spiraling despair. He exclaims that her hand is bleeding. But as they glance down at the hand he holds, it's pristine and unblemished. Recoiling in fear, she demands he release her. The chairman had explicitly warned her to conceal her self-harm. However, it appeared she'd grown reckless amidst her earlier ruminations. Hazen questioned if he'd merely imagined things moments ago. Yet, her blood-stained visage remained vivid in his mind, lurking beneath her facade of saintly purity. As evening descended, Maria departed. Following his words, her face blanched in utter astonishment. She fled as if pursued by something or someone unseen. Hasten contemplated what might have transpired, perched on a bench, while the boy from earlier enjoyed a chilled beverage beside him. The child expressed gratitude for Hasten's occasional companionship, particularly after the loss of his mother. Hasten, however, dismissed it, claiming he simply had nothing else to occupy his time. Then, the boy inquired if Maria was Hasten's sweetheart. Hasten's denial seemed to evoke disappointment in the child. They continued their conversation and play a while longer before Hasten returned home. The following day, at Glory Guild's headquarters, a contingent of executives convened with the lead scientist. He intended to unveil something, guaranteed to incite a furor among them. It was the poison poppy. He proclaimed it to be the catalyst that would propel Glory Guild down a novel trajectory. The others erupted in cries of disbelief, astounded that he would even suggest such a thing. He urged them to compose themselves. It was the most perilous illicit substance in existence, but he possessed a vision for its utilization, a vision that could elevate Glory Guild to unprecedented heights. The others remained demonstrably opposed to the notion. One executive boldly attempted to quash the idea entirely. Suddenly, a cigarette hurtled across the room, detonating directly before him. The cigarette's owner lit another, and admonished him against raising his voice. During a meeting, Guggenai, who appeared intensely intrigued by the exchange, commanded the man to resume his seat. She then instructed the doctor to proceed with his presentation. The doctor cut to the chase, revealing that, despite its inherent dangers, poison poppy offered significantly more advantages than disadvantages. The drug dramatically amplified healing capabilities, and a skilled healer was already an invaluable resource for the guild. One executive inquired if this implied administering the drug to Maria. Guggenai immediately dismissed the suggestion. Maria was the embodiment of Glory Guild. Subjecting her to poison poppy presented an unacceptable risk. For now, they needed to identify a suitable healer. In Eugene, one was the ideal candidate. They could deceive the association's vice president, claiming they merely sought to enhance the boy's abilities. This would also bolster their public image, as acquiring the plant necessitated raiding poison dungeons. Most executives still deemed the plan excessively hazardous. However, their paramount concern was preserving Glory Guild's internal stability. As they debated amongst themselves, the chairman silenced them. He then commanded them to acquire all poison dungeons with utmost haste. Should another clan or guild secure them first, they were to seize them by any means necessary. Furthermore, they were to execute this without alerting Maria. With the chairman's unwavering support, dissent was impossible. The poison poppy plan was set in motion. Back at the cleanup clan's headquarters, Chill 1 received notification that their poison dungeon requests were being denied. Dungeons universally deemed undesirable were now being purchased by the district. Hasten instantly deduced Glory Guild's involvement. Once again, they were proving to be a thorn in his side. He decided to contact someone capable of resolving the issue. He dialed Pio Hyokyu. The man answered almost immediately, surprised by Hasten's initiative. Nevertheless, he seemed delighted to converse.